Another day, another banger. Today we'll be jumping right into the Riddick trilogy. This will include Pitch Black, the Chronicles of Riddick as well as Riddick. Without further ado, give this video some love if you enjoy it, and as always sit back, relax and enjoy the recap. Pitch Black kicks off on a transport ship named Hunter Gratzner drifting through space and carrying 40 passengers to the Tangiers system. All passengers are in cryosleep, except for the infamous criminal Richard Riddick. Escorted by law enforcement, Riddick is being taken back to prison. However, their journey takes a deadly turn when the ship collides with debris from a passing comet. The impact wakes the crew from cryosleep, but disaster strikes immediately. The captain is killed before he can leave his pod. Docking pilot Carolyn Fry and navigator Greg Owens scramble to take control of the damaged vessel. Realizing they're plummeting toward an unknown planet, they send out a distress signal and attempt to manage the descent. In a desperate move, Carolyn begins purging sections of the ship to reduce its weight. As the situation worsens, Carolyn prepares to eject the passenger cabin entirely, but Greg stops her by blocking the airlock doors. As the ship crashes to the planet's surface, the passenger cabin breaks apart, scattering debris and tearing the vessel as it slides to a halt. During the process, though, Johns escapes his stasis pod and clings to a post to avoid being thrown. When the crash finally ends, the surviving passengers climb out of their pods, calling for their companions. Johns quickly discovers that Riddick has escaped from his pod and starts searching for him beneath the wreckage. Riddick suddenly attacks, attempting to strangle Johns with his feet. After a brief struggle, Johns breaks free and subdues the dangerous convict. While searching for other survivors, the passengers discover a stowaway, a boy named Jack. Meanwhile, Carolyn finds Greg impaled by a metal rod. Shaza warns her not to remove the rod as it's dangerously close to Greg's heart. Carolyn requests the passengers retrieve an estephine from the rear section of the ship, but they inform her that part of the ship is missing. Accepting the inevitable, Carolyn asks to stay with Greg to share his final moments alone. Later, the passengers check the cargo for supplies. Among the items, they find bottles of wine stored in a sarcophagus belonging to antique dealer Paris Ogilvy. Imam Abu al-Walid, traveling with 3 young boys on a Hajj pilgrimage, explains that they cannot drink alcohol. Despite Johns pointing out the lack of alternatives, al-Walid insists that water can be found in the desert. Elsewhere, Riddick, who is handcuffed to a post on the ship, notices the top of the post is shattered and manages to escape. Johns discovers his absence and finds part of the broken handcuff in the desert, quickly assembling a team to track him down. Outside the ship, Jack, Shaza, and Zeke create makeshift breathing aids to help them inhale more oxygen. Carolyn enlists al-Walid to join her in searching for water before the planet's 2 suns set. However, they soon discover a 3rd sun rising in the opposite direction, meaning the planet never experiences darkness. Meanwhile, Johns realizes that Riddick is heading toward the rising blue sun, deliberately leaving the broken handcuff in the opposite direction to mislead his pursuers. Carolyn, Johns, al-Walid, and the Muslim boys, Ali, Hassan, and Suleiman, head toward the rising sun, determined to recapture Riddick and search for water. While scanning the horizon with a telescope, John spots what appears to be trees in the distance, suggesting the presence of water. Upon reaching the area, they realize the structures are the skeletal remains of a colossal creature. Bones are scattered all around, leading al-Walid to deduce that it's a communal graveyard. As they rest near the skeleton, Carolyn confesses to Johns that during the crash she nearly jettisoned the passenger cabin, but Greg stopped her. Unbeknownst to them, Riddick is hiding in the shadows within the skeletal remains, armed with a knife. While they talk, Riddick stealthily cuts a lock of Carolyn's hair and smells it before slipping away unnoticed. The group continues and discovers an abandoned mining settlement. Carolyn ventures into one of the buildings, attempting to activate the lights with voice commands, but nothing responds. Inside, she finds a solar-powered orrery and realizes the planet remains bathed in constant daylight, which explains the lack of artificial lighting. When she steps back outside, Carolyn is overjoyed to find a dropship nearby and screams in excitement. Back at the crash site, Paris, Shaza, and Jack hear unsettling noises from the rear of the ship. As they prepare to defend themselves, a lone man approaches. Shaza nearly attacks him, but they discover he is one of the survivors. Before they can react further, Zeke mistakes the man for Riddick and shoots him. Realizing his grave error, Zeke drags the body to a mass grave he dug for the other dead passengers. While disposing of the body, something suddenly pulls Zeke into the hole. He fires his gun repeatedly in a panic, but the shots abruptly stop. Hearing the gunfire, Shaza rushes to the grave. She uncovers it, finding blood near the opening, and spots Riddick nearby. Assuming he's responsible, she chases after him, but Riddick escapes. Johns intercepts him and snatches Riddick's goggles, which protect his sensitive eyes from the daylight. After capturing him, Shaza furiously beats Riddick, blaming him for Zeke's disappearance before Johns locks him up. Later, Carolyn confronts Riddick, demanding to know what happened to Zeke's body. Riddick cryptically tells her that he's not the one they should fear. Jack, curious about Riddick's unusual eyes, asks how he got them. Riddick explains that during his time in prison where there was no daylight, he paid a doctor to perform a procedure allowing him to see in the dark. He insists he didn't kill Zeke, prompting Carolyn to investigate further. With a rope tied around her waist, Carolyn descends into the hole where Zeke disappeared. She discovers a cavern with holes in the ceiling and begins exploring. As she moves cautiously, a shadowy creature silently stalks her. Carolyn stumbles upon Zeke's severed foot and, horrified, realizes the cave is filled with the lurking creatures. She scrambles to climb out, but her rope is suddenly tugged from below. Hearing her screams, Jack alerts the others waiting near the grave. Johns breaks through the wall and helps pull Carolyn out just in time. However, as she steps away from the edge, something grabs her again, yanking her back into the cave. The group quickly cuts the rope, narrowly saving her. Realizing Riddick was telling the truth, Johns reluctantly unchains him, demanding that Riddick hand over his weapons and follow orders. Instead of retaliating, Riddick returns Johns' weapon and agrees to help. The group heads back to the abandoned settlement to retrieve a power cell for the dropship. Upon arrival, Carolyn discovers they'll need 5 additional power cells to get the ship operational. Meanwhile, Jack, deeply fascinated by Riddick, shaves her head and dons goggles to emulate him. As the group refreshes themselves with water from a moisture machine, Allie wanders into the coring room. While the group speculates on why the miners abandoned the site, Riddick remarks that they likely died there, pointing out that their belongings were never moved. Suddenly, sunlight pierces through the roof of the coring room, startling bat-like creatures hiding in the dark. The creatures attack Allie, forcing him to flee to another room. Hearing his screams, the group rushes to the scene. Al-Walid opens a door, releasing hundreds of the creatures, which flee toward a mine shaft. Moments later, Allie's mangled body falls to the ground, devastating Al-Walid, who buries the boy as the others somberly look on. Dropping a flare into the shaft, the group discovers it littered with human bones. Riddick deduces that the miners tried to use the coring room as a haven because of its secure doors but overlooked the open shaft, which allowed the creatures to reach them. Johns observes that the creatures seem reluctant to enter the light, concluding that their best chance of survival is to stay in daylight. However, with the power cells still to retrieve, the group faces the daunting reality that their safety is anything but guaranteed. With that, Carolyn examines the last sample taken from the shaft and notices it was dated 22 years ago. She deduces that this must be significant and uses the orrery to investigate further. She discovers that the planet experiences an eclipse that plunges it into total darkness every 22 years. Alarmed, Carolyn informs Johns that they need to retrieve the power cells from the crashed ship before the eclipse begins. However, Johns advises caution, warning that Riddick might hijack the ship if given the chance. He reveals that Riddick can pilot a ship, suggesting they wait until the last moment to bring the cells. Later, Riddick approaches Carolyn and casts doubt on John's character, hinting that he isn't a legitimate law enforcement officer but a bounty hunter. Riddick claims Johns only wants him alive because he'll earn a larger reward. Carolyn dismisses the accusations, but Riddick makes one final effort to undermine her trust by hinting at Johns' drug addiction. Suspicious, Carolyn confronts Johns and catches him injecting morphine into his eye. Johns defends his actions, claiming his morphine use is under control. Carolyn puts it on him, pointing out that he could have used it to ease Greg's pain when he was dying. Under pressure, Johns reveals that he uses morphine because Riddick once stabbed him near his spinal cord, leaving a piece of the shiv embedded there. Their argument is interrupted when the group realizes the eclipse is beginning. They rush to the solar-powered buggy and head to the crash site to retrieve the power cells. As they arrive, the sky darkens as another planet's rings cover the two suns, enveloping the world in pitch blackness. In the distance, the group hears unsettling squeals as swarms of bat-like creatures emerge from spires. The creatures quickly descend, forcing the group to run for the safety of the cargo hold. The flying beasts arrive before Riddick and Shaza can reach the hold. Dropping to the ground to avoid detection, they hope the creatures won't notice them. However, Shaza panics and gets up to continue running, while Riddick remains motionless. The creatures immediately swoop down, attacking Shaza and carrying her away. Riddick reaches the cargo hold moments later and looks out, seeing countless more creatures emerging from the spires in the distance. As the creatures pierce the walls of the cargo hold with their claws, the group retreats deeper inside. While others use cutting torches to break through the walls to reach another room, Riddick observes a creature feasting in the shadows. Hassan joins him but panics when the creature finishes its meal and moves in. Riddick warns him to stay still, but Hassan flees in terror. Another creature emerges from the darkness and kills him, leaving the group shaken as they realize the creatures are relentless and will pick them off one by one if they don't find a way to survive. As more creatures emerge from the darkness, Riddick runs toward the group, but he drops to the ground as they shine a light in his direction, momentarily blinding him as well as burning the creature with the light. Before it can escape, Johns shoots and kills it. Examining the dying creature, the group realizes that the beasts are vulnerable to light. The group plans to continue on foot to the dropship as the buggy is no longer usable. Al-Walid points out that the orrery indicates the eclipse will last too long to wait for the suns to return. With no other choice, they return to the ship's main cabin to retrieve the power cells and gather every light source they can carry. Riddick warns them to check for cuts, as the creatures can smell blood. Dragging the batteries and surrounded by glowing tubes for protection, the group sets out for the mining settlement with Riddick leading the way. The creatures follow at a distance but are unable to approach due to the lights. During their journey, Paris accidentally drops a flashlight. Jack attempts to retrieve it, but the creatures start moving in. Panicking, Paris crawls away, dragging one of the batteries with him. This action extinguishes some of the protective light, leaving the group exposed. A creature attacks Paris, and in his final moments he takes a sip from his wine flask, spits it out in front of a lighter, and creates a burst of flame. Though the fire briefly startles the creatures, they overwhelm him moments later. As the group comes across a canyon, Riddick suggests finding another route, warning that the creatures will sense someone bleeding. When the group insists no one is injured, Riddick reveals that Jack is a girl, pointing out that the scent of blood is coming from her. Jack confesses she pretended to be a boy to avoid harassment. Carolyn suggests returning to the crash site, but Johns refuses, using the moment to reveal to the others that Carolyn had tried to purge the passenger cabin during the crash. As they continue toward the settlement, John speaks privately with Riddick, proposing that they sacrifice someone to use as bait to distract the creatures. When John suggests using Jack, Riddick counters that they might need someone bigger. Realizing Riddick intends for him to be the bait, Johns attacks, and the two engage in a brutal fight. Riddick gains the upper hand, slashing John's back with his shiv. As John scrambles to load his weapon, Riddick disappears into the darkness. Moments later, a creature impales Johns, biting off his head. Riddick returns to the group and urges them to keep moving toward the settlement. When he informs them of John's death, Jack begins to cry, but Riddick coldly tells her not to mourn for him. The group presses on, knowing the creatures are still stalking them in the dark. Nonetheless, the survivors continue their journey through the canyon, keeping Jack in the center of the group to mask her scent from the creatures. Riddick trails behind, dragging the power cells. A swarm of creatures descends upon them but is kept at bay by the lights they carry. As they press forward, Carolyn notices some of the creatures fighting each other, a sign of their desperation. While passing through a massive skeleton, a creature grabs Suleiman's leg. The group fends off the beast by igniting spilled fuel on the ground, driving the creature away. Riddick pushes on while the others tend to Suleiman's wounds. When Jack tries to follow him, a creature ambushes her. Though Riddick initially hesitates, he ultimately charges back to rescue her, battling the creature. After a fierce struggle, he kills it with his knife. Just then, rain begins to fall, forcing the group to stop and find shelter to protect their torches. While they contemplate their next move, a creature suddenly snatches Suleiman, dragging him to the top of a cliff. Later, Riddick leads the remaining survivors to a cave and seals the entrance to keep them safe. Leaving them behind, he ventures alone to the settlement, dragging the power cells. Back in the cave, the last torch runs out of fuel. However, they discover glowing insects on the walls and use them to fashion makeshift lamps. Fearing that Riddick might abandon them, Carolyn decides to leave the cave and head to the settlement. When she arrives, she finds Riddick preparing the dropship for takeoff. Riddick suggests leaving the others behind, inviting Carolyn to board. Though she hesitates, she steps inside the ship. However, her conscience soon prevails, and she lunges at Riddick, asserting her authority as the ship's captain and declaring she won't abandon anyone. Riddick overpowers her and challenges her resolve, asking if she's truly willing to risk her life for Jack and Al-Walid. Her resolute response convinces him to accompany her back to the cave to retrieve them. On the way back to the dropship, the group encounters several creatures blocking their path. They find an opening and manage to slip past, eventually reaching the ship. However, Riddick is left behind to face a creature. Using his skill, he stays within the beast's blind spot, but another creature ambushes him from behind. Carolyn hears Riddick scream and runs back to help. Moments later, Riddick appears before her, bleeding from a leg wound. As Carolyn helps him stand, a flying creature impales her and carries her away. Devastated but determined, Riddick makes it back to the dropship and takes the pilot's seat. As the creatures swarm the ship, he momentarily shuts off the engines, waiting for the creatures to get closer. Jack panics as the beasts surround them, pleading with Riddick to take off. At the last second, Riddick reignites the engines, killing the creatures with the flames and bright light from the exhaust. The dropship lifts off, leaving the deadly planet behind. In orbit, Riddick asks Jack to tell the authorities that he died on the planet, ensuring he won't be hunted again. The dropship disappears into the vastness of space, leaving the horrors of the planet behind. The next movie title, The Chronicles of Riddick, opens up to a galactic army known as the Necromongers waging a relentless crusade across the cosmos, seeking their promised land, the Underverse, a dark and mysterious new realm. Their leader, the Lord Marshal, returns from the Underverse with immense power, leading his army to destroy and conquer worlds, leaving chaos in their wake. At UV System Planet 6, Riddick is hunted by mercenaries led by Tooms. Using his skills in the cover of darkness, Riddick lures Tooms' henchmen into a cave and eliminates them one by one. With his enemies defeated, Riddick captures Tooms and interrogates him about who hired him. Tooms reveals he was hired anonymously by someone on planet Helion Prime. Riddick spares Tooms but throws him out of the ship and sets a course for Helion Prime. As Riddick travels, he reflects on his past, lamenting the betrayal of people he once trusted, including a holy man whose life he saved. Meanwhile, on the desolate planet Crematoria, Mercenaries shove a steel box containing a defiant woman into a cage. Despite her resistance, they force her in, and she screams in frustration, surrounded by the growls of caged beasts nearby. During his journey, Riddick experiences a haunting vision of a woman who tells him he will soon remember the events that transpired in Furia. He wakes abruptly when his ship sounds an alarm. Another vessel demands he follow them for security inspections, but Riddick refuses, engages in combat, and successfully escapes. On Helion Prime, Imam walks through the streets, sensing the rising anxiety among the people as of the Necromonger's impending invasion spread, foreshadowing the danger looming over the planet. Soon enough, Imam returns home to find Riddick waiting for him. Riddick, suspicious, accuses Imam of betraying him by revealing his location to mercenaries. Imam defends his actions, explaining that he did so to protect his family and prepare for the inevitable Necromonger invasion. Riddick's hostility eases when he notices Imam's daughter Ziza, who is fascinated by Riddick after hearing stories of his heroism. However, Ziza's mother, Lajun, quickly ushers her to safety. Riddick demands to know who placed the bounty on his head. Imam expresses his fears about the deteriorating state of the universe and warns that Helion Prime may soon fall. Riddick, not giving a shit about the galaxy's problems, dismisses his concerns. Later, hooded figures arrive, accompanied by Arian, a member of the elemental race. Arian admits to orchestrating the bounty in hopes of enlisting Riddick to fight against the Necromongers. Imam recounts Arian's story of how Furian male babies were massacred, believing it might be connected to Riddick. They question Riddick about his origins, but the interrogation is interrupted when soldiers pound on the door searching for him. Imam pleads with Riddick to help fight the invaders, but Riddick refuses, unwilling to involve himself further. As Riddick prepares to leave, Imam accuses him of abandoning another young girl to her fate. The guards break in, finding Riddick with his back to them. Before they can act, Riddick extinguishes the candles, plunging the room into total darkness. The guards open fire blindly, but Riddick easily subdues them. When one terrified guard flees, Riddick coldly asks about the girl. Imam explains that Jack, who saw Riddick as an older brother, searched for him but was ultimately imprisoned on crematoria. Imam warns that Jack feels betrayed by Riddick for abandoning her. Riddick, unaffected, tells Imam that everyone should have stayed away from him and leaves. Soon after, the Necromongers invade Helion Prime, launching a devastating assault. Riddick watches the destruction as Imam, his family, and other citizens flee for safety. The Helion soldiers attempt to fight off the invaders but are overwhelmed as more Necromonger forces descend. Amid the chaos, Imam tells his family to hide while he scouts for a safe path, calling for them to follow. Imam finds the way blocked by Necromonger forces. Imam attempts to navigate the battlefield but is saved by Riddick, who pulls him to safety. During the battle, a Necromonger soldier falls but activates a deadly light orb that annihilates everything in its radius. In the aftermath, Riddick offers to help Imam and his family escape the planet, but Imam insists on leading them to a shelter instead. Riddick guides them to safety but hides as Necromongers sweep the area with heat scanners to locate survivors. To protect his family, Imam creates a diversion, drawing the Necromongers' attention. He is pursued by Ergun, a fearsome warrior. Cornered, Imam faces his fate with courage, declaring his confidence in the afterlife. Meanwhile, Riddick searches for Imam and finds his necklace in a pool of blood. Following the trail, he discovers Imam's lifeless body below, broken and bloodied. Grieving, Riddick retrieves the necklace, vowing vengeance against those responsible. The morning after the conquest, Lord Marshal marches through Helion Prime, eager to expand his army by converting the surviving population into Necromongers. Commander Vako observes the spectacle while his wife, Dame Vako, revels in the planet's downfall. Vako chastises her for her apparent delight, reminding her of her place among their people. Unfazed, Dame confidently states her place is by his side. Facing the Helion survivors, the Purifier steps forward, declaring that humans across the universe are an unguided mistake that the Necromongers seek to correct. He offers them a chance to convert and be welcomed into the Underverse, a promised paradise. Ergun interrupts the gathering, staggering in with a blade embedded in his back. Lord Marshal points to his vast army, explaining that they were once like the survivors but found salvation through conversion. When the crowd refuses, the Purifier shares his own story of denial and eventual conversion, urging them to kneel for purification. A defiant man steps forward, declaring that the universe is full of diverse religions and that faith cannot be forced. In response, Lord Marshal displays his power by stealing the man's soul. Terrified by the display, the crowd begins to kneel. Among them, Riddick stands alone and reveals himself. Vako orders him to kneel, but Riddick refuses and demands the chance to fight Ergun, the man who killed Imam. Vako agrees, and Ergun confidently faces Riddick. The fight is swift and brutal. Riddick uses the blade still lodged in Ergun's back to kill him. Fascinated by Riddick's skill, Lord Marshal approaches and offers him the same blade as a token. He then orders Riddick to be taken to the quasi-dead's half-dead telepaths who will determine Riddick's true nature. Dame Vako flirtatiously volunteers to guide him. At the necropolis, Dame leads Riddick to the center chamber before leaving him alone. The quasi-deads emerge from their chambers and probe Riddick's memories, uncovering his connections to Jack, Arian, and Imam. They confirm that Riddick is a Furian, a member of the race Lord Marshal sought to eliminate. Declared a threat, the Lord Marshal orders his men to destroy Riddick. Riddick manages to escape with ease, but his freedom is short-lived. He is captured by Toombs and his crew, who tracked him using the locator on his stolen ship. Aboard Toombs' vessel, the mercenary wonders who will pay the highest price for Riddick. Deliberately, Riddick manipulates Toombs into choosing Crematoria Prison, tempting him with the promise of a lucrative payout. Aboard the Necromonger's armada, Vako approaches Lord Marshal with a tense demeanor but stops abruptly when the Lord Marshal turns to face him. Vako reports on Riddick's trail but questions the necessity of using a warship to track one man. Despite his protests, Lord Marshal orders him to proceed. In private, Dame Vako insinuates that the Lord Marshal is only half the warrior Vako is, subtly encouraging him to pursue leadership. Vako strikes her, reminding her that the Lord Marshal sees everything, but Dame shifts her approach, seducing him while whispering that he's worthy of the throne. By the throne, they watch as the Lord Marshal interrogates Arian, demanding Riddick's location. Vako notices Arian's captive status, but Dame points out that she isn't being treated like a prisoner. She urges Vako to follow orders while she investigates why Riddick poses such a threat to the Lord Marshal. Meanwhile, Toombs' ship crash lands into a cave on Crematoria. Leading a chained Riddick to the prison, Toombs taunts him as Riddick kills one of his crew, remarking that it means one less person to share the reward. Upon landing, the warden greets them but offers Toombs a reduced payout, warning that Riddick is trouble. As Riddick is rolled down into the prison, he frees himself with ease and subdues a worker. Another inmate attempts to attack him but is stopped by a chain-wielding woman. Riddick removes his goggles to confront her but is interrupted by Gov, an authoritative prisoner who lectures on the difference between respect and betrayal in prison life. When asked who he is, Riddick simply replies that he's just passing through. Riddick seeks out the woman but is ambushed by her. After subduing her, he recognizes her as Jack, but she claims Jack is dead and introduces herself as Kira. She cuts Riddick with a blade hidden in her mouth and escapes by jumping over the railings. Elsewhere, aboard the Necromonger ship, the Purifier approaches Vako and suggests that their mission may be a test of faith. Vako, angered by the implication, accuses the Purifier of questioning his loyalty. The Purifier calmly denies this, hinting at deeper reasons for his presence. Back in the Armada, Dame interrogates Arian about Riddick's origins. Arian reveals a prophecy foretelling the downfall of a powerful warrior at the hands of a male Furian. Dame deduces that the warrior is Lord Marshal, and that Riddick is destined to bring about his demise. She encourages Vako to kill Riddick to prove his loyalty and gain the opportunity to stage a revolt. Unbeknownst to them, the Purifier overhears their plans. On Crematoria, guards unleash growling beasts into the prison. Gov warns Riddick not to make eye contact with them. The prisoners scatter, seeking safety behind steel bars. Those who fail to hide are swiftly attacked and killed. As chaos erupts, Kira skillfully dodges a charging beast, displaying her agility. When a beast emerges from behind the waterfalls, Riddick defies the warning and instead of backing down, locks eyes with the creature. After some time, Gov sees Riddick calmly stroking the beast as if it were a pet, earning the respect of the other prisoners. Meanwhile, guards capture Kira, searching her for concealed weapons. One guard crosses the line, frisking her inappropriately. Kira fights back fiercely but is quickly overpowered. Riddick approaches, but the guards dismiss him as unthreatening. When one guard attacks him, Riddick kills him effortlessly with just a teacup. The other guards flee in terror, realizing his lethal potential. Afterward, Kira and Riddick engage in a heated argument. Kira confesses she sought out mercenaries to learn their ways but ended up enslaved. Riddick reminds her that he told her to stay in New Mecca to protect her, but she went her own way. Kira defends her actions, arguing that she had no one else to turn to. Disappointed, Riddick walks away. Later, the guards open the prison chamber to release fresh air, which catches Riddick's attention. Gov questions Riddick's identity, but instead of answering, Riddick shares his escape plan, offering Gov the chance to join him. Above the prison, the warden negotiates with Toombs, finalizing payment for Riddick. Toombs is satisfied until the warden reveals that a Necromonger ship is approaching. Toombs protests, claiming he deliberately lost their ship, but the warden accuses him of stealing a prisoner from the Necromongers. The argument escalates into a gunfight, forcing Toombs to escape by sliding down a rope. As the battle above quiets, Riddick climbs the rope, spotting the approaching Necromonger ship. Seizing the opportunity, he opens the cages below and heads for the exit, only to find it jammed. Gov and the other prisoners catch up, but Riddick reveals that the guards have already emptied their bank, escaped, and barred the doors to prevent anyone from following. He admits that he had planned to do the same but changes course. Before leaving, Riddick traps Toombs in a cage among the beasts. Then he raises the guard's platform to the surface. The prisoners are hesitant, fearing the deadly sun's rays. Gov suggests they travel under the cover of night and reach the hangar before sunrise to escape the planet. As the prisoners move toward the stone mountains, the guards spot Riddick's group heading toward the hangar. Anatoly prepares to shoot but hesitates when he loses sight of Riddick. Moments later, Riddick incapacitates Anatoly from above with a swift strike. The guards exchange fire with the inmates but retreat to regroup. The prisoners press on, climbing the stone mountain. However, as they near the top, a scorching sun begins to rise, forcing them to take cover behind the rocks. Kira, unable to keep pace, finds herself trapped in a sunlit corner, the heat quickly closing in. Acting swiftly, Riddick swings across on a rope, grabs Kira, and lands them both in the safety of the shadows just before the fiery heat reaches them. Eventually, the group finally reaches the summit just as the Necromonger ship arrives. The Necromongers await at the prison entrance, which opens to reveal the guards. A fierce battle ensues as the guards open fire. Suddenly, Riddick leaps into the fight, launching an attack on the Necromongers. During the battle, Vako takes aim and shoots Riddick, incapacitating him. As Vako closes in, Kira intervenes, throwing herself at him, causing him to lose his balance and drop his weapon. Just then, the woman from Riddick's vision reappears and places her hand on his chest. The touch restores his memories of Furian destruction. Overwhelmed, Riddick's body convulses, and he unleashes a sudden surge of power, knocking out the Necromongers around him. The intense heat of the rising sun flares again as the Necromonger's ship hovers above. Vako and the remaining Necromongers retreat to their ship. With a final glance at Riddick, Kira follows them. Believing he is dead, Riddick regains consciousness as the Necromonger ship departs. The Purifier approaches Riddick, relaying a message from the Lord Marshal. If Riddick stays away, he will not be hunted. The Purifier then reveals that Vako will report Riddick as dead, creating an opportunity for Riddick to launch a surprise attack. Riddick grabs the Purifier, demanding to know where Kira is. The Purifier instead reveals that he too is a Furian and confesses his guilt for the atrocities he committed in the name of a faith that was never truly his. Back on Helion Prime, the Lord Marshal praises Vako for his accomplishments. Once the Lord Marshal leaves, Vako expresses regret for not bringing Riddick's body. Fearing he might have survived, Dame reassures him, reminding him that the Lord Marshal already believes he succeeded. The Lord Marshal visits Arian, asking her to confirm Riddick's death. Satisfied with her cryptic response, he turns away, failing to notice her enigmatic smile. Confident of his control, the Lord Marshal orders his army to depart Helion Prime. Behind the visor glint unmistakable silver eyes. Riddick is alive, and his mission for vengeance is far from over. Dame immediately informs Vako that Riddick is alive and aboard their ship, criticizing him for his failure. When Vako moves to alert the Lord Marshal, Dame stops him, suggesting they let Riddick create an opportunity for Vako to claim the throne. However, Vako hesitates, not wanting to kill his leader, but Dame points out the Lord Marshal's fear, labeling him weak and unfit to lead. For the sake of the Necromongers, she insists it's time for Vako to take charge. Her persuasion convinces him to act. Meanwhile, Riddick kills one of the Lord Marshal's special men, and later, the same Necromonger's lifeless body is presented to the Lord Marshal, showing a vision of Riddick before death. Enraged, the Lord Marshal orders Commander Toll to capture him. As the Necromongers assemble in the throne room, the Lord Marshal prepares for battle, wielding his whip. While Commander Toll searches the ship, Riddick sneaks into the quasi-dead's chamber and positions himself near the throne room's doors. With that, he bursts into the throne room, lunging at the Lord Marshal, but falls when the leader evades his attack. The Lord Marshal orders his guards to stand down and reveals Kira, now converted into a Necromonger with glazed eyes. He urges Riddick to accept conversion, promising he will escape death and rise into the Underverse. Kira echoes the Lord Marshal's words, saying conversion will cleanse their pain and lead them to a perfect life in the Underverse. Distraught, Riddick asks if she is truly conscious, but Kira walks away without answering. Riddick uses his blade and launches his knife at the Lord Marshal, almost killing him. The attack appears successful, and Dame urges Vako to act, but Vako waits. The Lord Marshal rises unharmed, holding the blade in his hand. Manifesting his astral projection, he strikes Riddick from multiple angles, overpowering him. He then attempts to pull Riddick's soul from his body, but Riddick summons his strength and counterattacks. Becoming enraged, the Lord Marshal attacks Riddick with his spear, trying to finish the battle and end him once and for all. Before he can strike a final blow, Kira stabs the Lord Marshal from behind. Angry, the Lord Marshal retaliates, knocking Kira into a column of spikes, fatally wounding her. Vako approaches and is commanded to kill Riddick, but ignores him as he wishes to take the throne from the Lord Marshal. As Vako swings his weapon, the Lord Marshal uses his astral projection to evade, but Riddick anticipates the move and stabs the Lord Marshal in the head, ending him. Vako's strike lands on nothing as the Lord Marshal collapses. Dame screams in despair as Arian watches, smiling with satisfaction. Riddick rushes to Kira's side, holding her as she takes her final breath. Grief-stricken, he slumps onto the throne. Vako and the remaining Necromongers kneel before Riddick in submission, acknowledging him as their new leader. Riddick kicks off on a strange and desolate planet. A vulture picks at a severed hand but is quickly grabbed by the throat by Riddick, who emerges battered from the rubble. Injured and dehydrated, he crawls toward a nearby pool of water, only to find it undrinkable. Taking a moment to rest, Riddick is jolted awake by distant howling. Bracing himself, he wedges his foot between two rocks to painfully reset his broken leg, gritting his teeth through the excruciating process. Unfortunately, his cries of pain alert a pack of hyena-like creatures to his presence. He dons his goggles and sees them approaching from the distance. Unable to outrun them, he retreats into the water and submerges, waiting as the creatures circle the area. Patient but cautious, they eventually retreat, giving Riddick a moment of respite. Emerging from the water, he begins to tend to his leg. But one of the hyena-like creatures sneaks up on him. It attacks, and after a tense scuffle, Riddick outsmarts it by throwing a piece of his armor into the distance. The creature instinctively chases after it like a dog fetching a stick. Using the distraction to his advantage, Riddick adjusts his leg and starts traversing the harsh desert terrain. Later, he finds a cave where he finally locates drinkable water. While exploring the area, he notices a set of steps but is interrupted by the growls of the hyenas, which have tracked him to the cave. As the creatures edge closer, the bravest among them ventures into the water, only to be attacked and killed by a large aquatic predator lurking below. The sight sends the rest of the pack fleeing. Turning back toward the water, Riddick faces the predator himself. A fierce fight ensues, but Riddick cleverly uses the same fetch tactic, throwing debris to distract the creature just long enough to escape. Continuing his journey through the desert, he finds an obelisk and collapses between its broken pieces, dragging one over himself to shield against the harsh environment. Exhausted, he drifts off, reflecting on how his perilous circumstances began. Riddick recalls his uneasy tenure as Lord Marshal of the Necromonger fleet. While searching for the mythical planet Furia, he grew increasingly distrustful of those around him. In his quarters, a woman from the Necromonger ranks approaches him, expressing concern about whether the guards are still present to ensure their safety. Her intentions turn deadly as she suddenly stabs Riddick in the back. Though wounded, Riddick retaliates, killing her and letting her body collapse to the floor. Shortly after, Siberius Vaco enters the room, questioning what happened and speculating on who might have orchestrated the assassination attempt. Riddick grimly remarks that the list of suspects could be endless, as his role as Lord Marshal had made him a target among his own people. Riddick rises from his chair, revealing blood smeared on the backrest, a stark warning to anyone who might challenge him. He addresses Siberius, acknowledging the circulating rumor that he's gone soft. Siberius taunts Riddick with the notion of weakness, but Riddick's sharp retort dares him to act on it. Siberius resists the bait and instead recounts an early memory of a legendary warrior with eyes like Riddick's, referencing the mythical planet Furia. Intrigued, Riddick demands to know Furia's location. Siberius hesitates until Riddick places a knife to his throat, forcing him to reveal that the only map to Furia resides in his possession. They strike a deal. Siberius offers Riddick a ship and passage to the planet in exchange for transcendence, the ultimate Necromonger goal. But when Riddick arrives, he realizes he's been betrayed. They've brought him to a desolate, random world instead. The betrayal turns deadly, and Riddick fights back with brutal efficiency. Amid the chaos, a soldier with a scarred face grabs a fallen comrade's gun and unleashes a storm of bullets, believing he's finally killed Riddick when the ground beneath him gives way. But Riddick, as always, survives. Now on a quest for vengeance, Riddick traverses the unforgiving desert, capturing a baby hyena-like creature. Keeping it caged, he feeds the pup and begins to bond with it. Later, while climbing a mountain, Riddick spots a distant civilization. On his way, he captures a baby serpent, extracting its venom. Using the venom as a test, he injects the hyena pup first, observing its reaction before injecting himself. The venom courses through his veins, energizing him and preparing him for the challenges ahead. Leaving his unlikely companion behind, Riddick confronts the serpent's larger adult counterpart. In a brutal encounter, the serpent bites his leg, but Riddick retaliates, slicing off its head. As he catches his breath, he hears the distressed cries of the baby hyena. While distracted, a massive serpent emerges from the water and attacks. Narrowly escaping, Riddick retrieves the hyena pup and prepares for round 2. Charging back into the fight, Riddick slides beneath the serpent, slashing its belly open in a flurry of guts and chaos. The serpent turns on its own spilled innards, consuming them in confusion. With his pup in hand, Riddick seizes the moment and hightails it out of the treacherous territory, leaving a trail of carnage behind. Sometime later, whether days, months, or even years, Riddick wanders the desert with his now fully grown hyena companion. The loyal animal fetches a ball and brings it back to him as they traverse the barren landscape. Eventually, they come across scattered remains of other creatures, hinting at the harshness of the environment. After climbing a hill, Riddick spots a building in the distance. Upon entering the facility, he scavenges for food and supplies, sharing a meal with his hyena. As a rainstorm looms, Riddick notes that their time on this planet might be coming to an end. Returning to the building, Riddick activates a beacon, which scans and identifies him. Unsurprisingly, he's flagged as wanted, and it's not long before his signal attracts a ship heading to the planet to claim him, dead or alive. The ship lands, and its crew, led by Santana, emerges to begin their hunt. Santana enters the facility with Diaz close behind, noticing warnings scrawled on the walls advising them to leave their ship behind or face death. Ignoring the ominous message, the crew starts preparing their machines to search for Riddick. Santana, showing his ruthless nature, instructs his youngest crew member, Luna, to wake up a prisoner from the ship. When the woman is released, Santana tells her to run before he changes his mind. However, as she flees, Santana coldly guns her down, her body collapsing right in front of Riddick, who watches from the shadows. Santana announces himself to Riddick with a boastful speech threatening to kill him. Before long, another ship lands, bringing a second crew to the hunt. This group, led by Colonel Johns, includes Boss Johns, Dahl, and their team. As they exit their ship, Santana makes it clear that Riddick belongs to him. Johns, unfazed, agrees to let them take the lead, promising only to spectate. However, it's clear the two crews are anything but friendly. Tensions flare as their conflicting agendas make cooperation impossible. While the teams bicker, Riddick begins preparing his strike. Two of Santana's crew patrol the area with a tracking machine which picks up movement. They all rush to investigate, only to find Riddick's hyena companion. Diaz raises his weapon and fires, narrowly missing the animal. Fortunately for him, the shot doesn't connect, because if John Wick taught us anything, killing a man's loyal companion is a death wish. As the tension rises and alliances fracture, Riddick patiently waits in the shadows, ready to exploit the chaos. It's clear that the real hunt is only just beginning. As the crews continue their hunt for Riddick, the hyena stealthily steals something, causing their tracking machine to malfunction. The disruption intensifies as Riddick manipulates its frequency from a distance, creating confusion. Dahl notices the missing item and questions Santana, who is visibly rattled. When Johns asks if the area was swept for traps before their arrival, Santana's unease deepens. One of Santana's crew members spots a metallic object on the ground. Despite being warned not to touch it, curiosity gets the better of him. At first, it seems harmless, a simple metal plate. However, as he steps forward, he triggers a foothold trap. Santana shouts for him to stay still, but the panicked man crawls forward only to trigger a second, deadlier trap. The gruesome scene puts everyone on edge as the realization sinks in. Riddick is systematically picking them off. Determined to catch Riddick, the crews press on. Two members of Santana's team stick together, but as they move through the darkness, one is suddenly dragged away. His companion panics, firing wildly into the void but hitting nothing. Meanwhile, Luna clutches his weapon nervously, as every shadow seems like a potential threat. On the other side, Johns orders his crew to stay indoors and remain vigilant. By morning, 3 members of Santana's team are dead. Desperate for support, Santana approaches John's team to propose a partnership. The exchange is anything but friendly. Dahl punches Santana, making her disdain clear. After some tense negotiation, Johns agrees to the alliance, but only on his terms. He leads, and Dahl is second in command. Santana reluctantly accepts, but not before another punch from Dahl to silence his complaints. Johns lays out the rules, stating he wants Riddick alive for now, but after the first day, Santana can do whatever he wants. With the plan in motion, they prepare for a daylight hunt. Boss notices Riddick's hyena nearby and instructs Dahl to shoot it with a barium-laced bullet for tracking. After missing her first shot, Dahl lands the second, ensuring they can follow the animal. Riding out on floating bikes, Boss and his crew track the hyena to a cave. Armed and alert, they move cautiously through the darkness, searching for Riddick. Reaching the cave's end, they stumble upon a hidden hideout. As they inspect the area, a figure appears in the shadows. Believing it's Riddick, they open fire without hesitation. When the dust settles, Boss realizes too late that the figure was one of Santana's missing crew members, now definitely dead. Before they can regroup, the hyena lunges at them, creating further chaos before darting away. Back at the ship, Dahl cleans herself, unaware of the growing danger. Boss attempts to contact her, but his messages fail to get through. Hearing an unexpected noise, Dahl pauses to investigate. Finding nothing, she resumes her routine, oblivious to the deadly game Riddick is still playing in the shadows. Riddick's hand stealthily reaches into the cleaning kit, taking some supplies while remaining undetected. Elsewhere, Luna helps a crew member as they attempt to repair an injured eye. Meanwhile, Riddick perches atop the ship, calmly observing his enemies. Using a small mirror, he inspects the hatch door and their activity below. Inside, Johns warns Santana of the growing danger, but Santana stubbornly ignores him. Riddick silently sneaks up behind Santana, ready to strike. However, Dahl's sudden entrance inadvertently saves Santana. A heated exchange follows, with Santana turning aggressive and threatening Dahl. Perched above in the vents, Riddick watches, prepared to intervene. Johns arrives and notices blood and a cryptic message on a locker. Dahl explains the blood is from Santana after she beat him up earlier. Santana, undeterred, insists on opening the locker despite warnings from the others that it could be a trap. Tensions rise as weapons are drawn, with everyone on edge. Johns steps in, urging calm and warning them not to do Riddick's work for him. They relent and allow Santana to open the locker. To everyone's relief, it contains only basic supplies. Afterward, Johns devises a plan to block the cave and secure their position. During the discussion, one crew member notices something amiss, a skylight left open. Investigating further, he is quickly overpowered by Riddick, who questions him. When asked if he's afraid, a crew member admits he is. By the time the others find him, it's too late. Riddick has taken everything essential for their escape, leaving them stranded. Johns orders the team to lock down the facility and establish a perimeter. They argue over their predicament with no viable options. Their ships are incompatible for combining power, and calling for backup would tarnish their reputations. Before they can decide, Riddick himself interrupts. They hear his voice coming from one of their slain hunters' devices, taunting them as he moves nearer. John steps forward, stating he will handle Riddick, but Riddick has already arrived. Emerging from the shadows, he commands their full attention. One by one, they lower their weapons as Riddick speaks. He confronts John, seeking answers about events from 10 years ago. Meanwhile, Dahl readies a horse tranquilizer, aiming it at Riddick as the conversation continues. Santana, visibly shaken now that Riddick is no longer just a myth but standing right in front of him, nervously steps forward. Riddick glances around before issuing a chilling warning. In 24 hours, no one will want to be on this planet. The weight of his words sinks in, leaving the group in tense silence as they realize the gravity of the situation. As the rain begins to fall, Riddick stands before the group, making his intentions clear. He offers them a deal: hand over one of their ships peacefully, or when the rain hits the station, he'll start killing again. As Riddick walks away, Santana raises his weapon, but Riddick's loyal hyena lunges at him, interrupting his attack. While the hyena tears into Santana, Dahl fires a tranquilizer dart at Riddick, then another and another. Riddick finally goes down after the fourth shot. Amid the chaos, Santana shoots and kills the hyena, leaving Riddick's companion lifeless. Enraged, Johns punches Santana before knocking Riddick unconscious and taking him prisoner. Now in chains, Riddick faces interrogation. Johns demands answers about his son and whether he survived the crash 10 years ago. Riddick remains tight-lipped, offering no answers. Turning to Santana, he warns that if the chains come off, Santana will be the first to die, and it will take less than 5 seconds with the machete he always carries. The tense back and forth yields no results, and Riddick shifts the focus. He instructs Dahl to look outside and describe what she sees. She complies, noting the rain. Riddick tells her to watch carefully and alert him when she notices something else. Meanwhile, Johns grows increasingly frustrated, shouting at Riddick for answers about his son. Riddick remains calm, waiting for the moment. Then it happens: the rain begins to unleash chaos. Riddick announces that time is up. Reluctantly, Johns agrees to hand Riddick over to Santana. As Santana prepares to execute him, their equipment picks up movement. The team rushes outside to investigate, with Santana monitoring the situation from the screen. The spotlights reveal serpents rising from the ground, their massive forms emerging from the soaked earth. One of Santana's crew fires at the creatures but is killed when a serpent pierces through the metal shell of the facility. Chaos ensues as the crew tries to fend off the serpents, but they are overwhelmed. Moss is taken from the roof and more serpents swarm, escalating the panic. Amidst the carnage, Riddick laughs, taunting them. He warns that in 60 seconds his chains will come off and they'll need to focus on escaping the planet. When they ask how it could get worse, Riddick points out that no one knows how many serpents are buried beneath them. The grim reality forces Johns to strike a deal with Riddick. As Johns moves to release him, Santana steps forward, holding a blade to his throat, insisting the chains stay on. Dahl attempts to intervene, but Santana strikes her, and Diaz restrains her. As Santana raises his blade to kill Riddick, Riddick kicks the blade into the roof, sending Santana stumbling backward into a cabinet. As Santana rises, the blade falls, and with expert precision, Riddick sends it flying straight through Santana's head, killing him instantly. With Santana dead and the serpents closing in, the crew realizes they must rely on Riddick to survive. True to his word, Riddick kicks the box forward and steps inside, honoring his deal. The crew, shocked and slightly impressed by his honor, or perhaps just afraid, lets him loose. Together, they prepare to face the serpent threat and make their way to the ship. As the battle begins, Vargas is bitten by a baby serpent. Though Diaz manages to kill it, the venom quickly claims Vargas' life. With no time to mourn, the group mounts their hovering motorbikes and speeds toward the location of the nodes needed to power the ship. Weaponless, Riddick improvises, using the flames from his bike to take down serpents in their path. Tensions rise when Diaz, seizing an opportunity, pushes Johns off a mountain. Luckily, Riddick saves him just in time. At their destination, Riddick begins digging for the nodes while revealing a harsh truth. John's son had a morphine addiction, a revelation that deepens their strained dynamic. Meanwhile, Diaz sabotages one of the bikes and tries to kill Riddick and Johns. Predictably, Diaz proves no match for Riddick, who kills him after a brutal fight. However, Diaz manages to destroy the last functioning bike in his final act, leaving them stranded in the treacherous landscape. With no other option, Riddick and Johns begin walking back, fighting off waves of serpents along the way. The relentless attacks leave Riddick badly injured when a serpent catches him off guard. Johns throws a bomb, taking out the remaining serpents in the immediate area. However, rather than helping Riddick, Johns makes the ruthless decision to abandon him. Returning to the ship, he urges the remaining crew to leave the planet immediately. Left behind, Riddick uses heated stones from the explosion to cauterize his wounds. Despite his injuries, he pushes forward, climbing and running to escape the pursuing serpents. Outnumbered and seemingly at the end of his rope, it looks like Riddick's fate is sealed, until blasts from the sky decimate the serpents. Johns has returned with the ship, saving Riddick at the last moment. Together, they escape the deadly storm and leave the planet behind. Their farewell carries a sense of respect and understanding, a "till I see you again" moment as they part ways. Now, Riddick sets off on his journey home, ready to confront his demons and those who betrayed him. He finally faces the man with the scarred face, uncovering the truth. Siberius never intended to betray Riddick. The scarred man, driven by his disdain for Riddick as an unbeliever, orchestrated everything. Riddick swiftly kills him, exacting his revenge. Before departing, Riddick asks a woman about Siberius' fate. She cryptically replies that Siberius is both alive and dead, having achieved transcendence. With this revelation, Riddick steels himself for the challenges ahead, prepared to face whatever comes next. Thanks for staying till the end, as usual. Check out some of my other videos if you haven't done it already, and as always, stay awesome and take care.